Hello and welcome back to Ask Christina Anything, the show where we ask Christina anything. Christina, thank you for joining us today. I want to begin with a series of questions that our viewers have asked about dating or relationship or even sex advice that we've come to the expert on. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
So Christina, our first question asks, I'm in a tough spot. My best friend and I have been friends for years, but lately I feel like she's been subtly comparing me to her new boyfriend, and it's making me feel insecure and resentful. I don't want to lose her, but I also don't know how to address this issue without causing a rift. What advice can you offer?
I think one of the best things you can do, especially if you've been best friends for years, is to kind of admit to that person that, hey, I'm feeling a little vulnerable in this moment, and this is kind of the reason why. I think when we have a best friend and they find partners, it can be hard for friends to adjust where somebody's time is now split or might even monopolize around building a new relationship. And we have to keep in mind that it's not just the person's relationship, they also have to work and have a life and have family to take care of. So what time they felt they previously had might be chipped away just due to commitments and then the new boyfriend on top.
Yeah.
So if I were that person, I'd really just let my friend know, like, hey, I'm feeling a little vulnerable and this is kind of why, and see what they say, see what the dynamic is there. It could just be a miscommunication of time. That person doesn't feel as important because they're kind of being ex-nayed for that new partner building relationship.
I think that's really well put. And the one thing I would ask about that would be, if this is like a friend that I've had for a very long time, I would almost feel like having a conversation like that would be pretty easy, I would hope anyway, in that situation. But let's say this is a new friend, how would you begin that conversation with them?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, especially if they're kind of a newer relationship. You can just kind of say, like, in my previous experiences, this kind of led me to these feelings and emotions, and it's good for me if I can kind of talk them out versus sit on them, because I think we know in any relationship, when we sit on the questions we have, we come to our own conclusions. And I know personally, I've learned many times in life that what I think I know the answer to, I'm wrong. And I don't typically find that out until after the situation and I'm wrong and I've burned a relationship or a connection, and where I go back up into that moment and say, okay, let's start this on a good note before it ends on a bad note. So just having that communication and that open dialogue and letting them know, like, maybe it's my own insecurities and they can help me get to the root cause of something that's happened in the past that's triggering the current.
That's a really good point, because you don't want to burn a bridge. Maybe that's not really happening, with that person maybe comparing you, and you go to them in, this state, and maybe it turns out it really wasn't what you thought it was. It's helpful to have a friend who goes, I understand, and you're not burning that bridge.
As somebody who at times has had almost abandonment issues, and it all triggers back to trauma or childhood trauma. So I also, as the friend that has the new boyfriend, if that friend communicated to me that they were feeling a little left behind, I might do a little deep diving. And what have your experiences been like in your former friendships? Have you had friendships end over certain things that maybe you felt you had no control over? And that might help educate me on where that person is in their personal growth, because maybe they're just insecure about friendships in general. And I think all of us, we never want to lose things that are important to us, but sometimes we're our own worst enemy. So it could just be a reflection of somebody not being confident or rising into the situation, and then not knowing how to handle something that's really not a big deal, but to them it feels like they're being left behind. But in reality, it's just helping them cope with a new adjustment of time frame that you're allowed to give them.
No, really well put. All right, we'll have more with Ask Christina Anything right after this break. Stay with us. All right, Christina, so our next question asks, I recently started dating this incredible woman I've met in my 31 years. She's perfect in every way, except she's a terrible driver. She gets road rage, had a collection of speeding tickets, and yells behind the wheel. I can't imagine ending my relationship over this one thing. What do I do?
I think as a culture, we take driving for granted. It's really a privilege, not a right. Drivers like that, it can become a dangerous situation very quickly. She could expose, the entire vehicle to violence or a road rage situation that nobody in that vehicle is asking for. Everybody in the car can become a victim at the hands of the driver. So for me, I think it's a bit more serious, and I would really have that conversation with them of like, what was your driver's ed like? Who taught you how to drive? You know, is this something that if I share my concern with you, that you might take a defensive driving course on your own? Is this something that you can work on? Because I think of it like this, Warren, if I find somebody who could be my future partner, but they're a terrible driver that risks my life, how am I going to allow them to drive with my children?
Yeah.
It's a problem in the moment, but also in the future. It can't be overlooked. I would definitely address this and see what that person is capable of. So I think just realizing what your boundaries are, and it's safety. You know, it comes down to that basic right of feeling safe within your travels, and not only yourself, but your partner. Who wants to build a life with somebody that could kill themselves or somebody else on the road that you lose? I think that's a really serious red flag that goes almost right to the top of my list of things that need to be addressed immediately, because you're only going to continue to bond with that person. And if they can't make any changes behind the wheel, and in Maine, you know, almost 100% of us have to drive to get to where we're going, then that might be one I bow out of, or take a serious reflection and see what can't translate with that relationship, that maybe she can work on those really poor driving habits.
Yeah. No, and really two things really come to mind for me. One is that, you know, road rage, in my experience at least, usually the people that have a lot of road rage, it usually translates to something else when they're not in the car, you know, and so they might be easily irritated, or there might be another factor at play. So maybe this person that is experiencing a lot of road rage might also have another trigger outside of driving a vehicle that you just haven't seen yet.
I actually think that is a phenomenal call out, Warren. I think especially in the beginning of relationships, you know, people want to interview well, and some people interview outstandingly well, and they can hide emotions and situations, but driving is something that is so unique that even she can't hide this bad habit. And you're right, her rage probably does translate within different categories, but she has perceived control in those settings with that new partner, so it hasn't been exposed yet. We all know in time people can't hide who they are for long, at least unless you're a perfect sociopath. So I think that's a great call out of like, when will the next shoe drop on this sudden anger that upsets her, and what will that look like for you? So that's definitely, I think, a bigger red flag than even driving, like that first came to my mind.
Exactly. Yeah, really well put. All right, we'll have more with Ask Christina Anything right after this break. Stay with us. All right, Christina, our next question asks, I've been married for 23 years to a wonderful man, but he's regressing from a functioning alcoholic into a full-blown non-functioning alcoholic. It's taken over our life, and he's put me in danger too many times to count. Is it time to throw in the towel?
The first piece of advice I would give this woman is to remove herself from the situation. There's no harm in separating from space. And I think for some people, especially in the grips of addiction, in some ways it's almost like a forced rock bottom scenario where the wife removes herself from the danger in the situations that he may be putting on and applying to her. Gives her space to take time and induce of, what do I really need next? What have I been missing? How long has this pattern been going? Is there a way to recover the relationship if he does get sober? Because just because somebody gets sober doesn't mean it mitigates and excuses everything they've done. I would take that separation, and then for her to kind of rebuild who she is, because when we're taking care of addicts, we lose ourselves very often. Your main focus becomes hiding their addiction initially, and then once it's out in public, you still are trying to maintain the image, the person, the situation. So she's turned into a chronic caregiver of somebody that is unpredictable and unstable. So she needs to kind of reevaluate and find that homeostasis herself, and find what she's been missing throughout this process and rebuild herself. You don't want to leave your partner in the lurch, but you do to a degree emotionally, but maybe not help-wise and lifeline-wise. So I would definitely recommend putting a plan in place for him to be able to figure out and follow once he wakes up in a sober mind and sees that his wife she's gone.
You've raised so many really good points there. And the one thing that I would say to this person, you're not responsible for his dysfunction. You know, you're not responsible for his alcoholism. You're not responsible for his actions or what he's choosing to do. Maybe you are talking to him and saying, this is happening. And he is seeing that this is affecting others, and he's choosing not to change. You know, an addict can only change if they want to change. And I think if they're choosing not to change, that's their choice, and you shouldn't be a part of them anymore.
I think I've learned firsthand, you can love someone from afar in life, and it's not easy. It goes hand in hand with pain. Everybody deserves to be in a loving relationship with somebody that truly cares about them. And
Exactly.
that relationship may have started that way, but we're certainly not here anymore. How long should people live in unhappy marriages before they pull a trigger? You know, whether it's addiction or not, this comes down to root cause of, what do I deserve? And I think that's a question not a lot of people ask themselves enough, especially when they're in these kind of abusive relationships with somebody who has a substance abuse problem, because they just give, and they don't want to feel like a failure or like they're letting somebody else's life down. But you have to remember, are you living? Are you taking care of yourself?
I think that's really well put about how you need to prioritize your needs over anything else in that situation. My big question would also be, are there children in this situation? And how old are these kids, you know? And I would be concerned about what those children, if they are younger, what they're seeing as a result of their father and what they might be, you know, internalizing.
That's a great call out. I think when I hear, 24-year-long marriage, I just assume they're going to be older, but that doesn't dictate anything about how old they are. And if this is a problem that they've been struggling with for years, they've been exposed to it. They've seen the patterns of abuse that follows an addict. So teaching them what a trauma bond looks like, because a lot of us bond to people who aren't good for us, and we go back to kind of fighting that need to be loved. So we try to overcome it anyway, and you end up in this cycle that you can't get out of. And so they'll mimic their relationships after this. They'll think, oh, that's what dads should be in a relationship. And so if you're in this situation and you have younger kids, I think the sooner versus the better to separate yourself, to separate all of you so you can decompress and figure out what a healthy relationship for a person looks like and what it doesn't.
This kind of comes back to the idea of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and how these really early traumas, while our brains are developing, permanently impact our relationships, our health, our fight or flight. These are traumas that we endure throughout our entire lives and can even pass on, through, that generation, that idea of generational trauma. And I think that's definitely something that as a parent, you need to be vigilant about. That is your responsibility to ensure that your child is in a safe place and not experiencing these things.
Very well said, Warren.
We'll have more with Ask Christina Anything right after this break. Stay with us. All right, Christina, our next question asks, one of my best friends since childhood is getting married. I originally said, yes, of course I'll be there, and RSVP'd. But I just got word that I won't be able to bring my service dog with me. They told me I could keep him in the car and not in the venue. I'm speechless. How do I approach this?
Well, I think being speechless is an okay response to
yes.
This cuts deep on many levels, especially since this is a childhood friend. This boils down to probably the new partner that their friend is marrying. As the childhood best friend, I would really ask my friend of who came to this conclusion? Whose decision was this? Was this the venue's decision? And depending on what they say there, directly ask, is this your new partner's decision? This is a make or break for me because as somebody with a disability that could use a service dog with my epilepsy, if I had one and somebody told me I couldn't bring it in, that's a game changer for me. You don't care about me or my health or my well-being. So I look at that and say, that's a safety risk for that person to attend their best friend's wedding.
Yeah.
Completely unacceptable. Although it might really hurt, since this has been a friendship that ran since childhood, if you can't kind of get to the bottom of it after having a conversation with them, you always want to hope that people have good intentions. And it could fall in a place of just some ignorance and not really understanding what a service dog is and how critical that is and as an extension of that person. If it's the person that you're marrying doesn't want you to have it just because they don't like dogs, well, they're probably not going to consider your feelings or your needs in the future going forward. So how are you going to maintain and continue a relationship with them if your dog's always going to have to be in the car that could save your life? For me, that would be an absolute ending of a relationship if it didn't come down to some kind of negligent ignorance about not understanding what a service dog is.
I was talking with our producer before this, and we were talking about how, a service dog in many cases is critical. To not be able to have their service dog in a situation would be entirely game-changing, and I think it is protected by law to some degree. My question would immediately be, as you said, Who's making this decision? Is this the venue? Is this your partner? Is this some other person attending? And what's the consequences if I say, screw it, I'm bringing my service dog in? You know, what, are you gonna remove me physically? Like, I think that would be the ultimate test of a relationship right there.
When I think about a basic friendship, and especially one that runs deep to childhood, if that was my wedding that I was putting, I'd say, okay, and what are we gonna dress the dog in? What kind of tux would they like? You know, so it's like, that to me already, it is kind of already teeing you up for an understanding of, we don't really care about you, because this person's been your friend lifelong. They've seen all the service dogs you've had along the way. Yeah. Why now? Yeah. So to me, if the initial response isn't, let's get him a bow tie and a tuxedo, I'm not going to begin with.
All right, well, thank you so much, Christina, for coming back and chatting with us. We always enjoy having you.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I can't wait to see you again next week.
All right, guys, you can watch all new episodes of Ask Christina Anything weekdays right here on PMC Channel 5 or on YouTube under Luigi Scarcelli Official. We'll see you next time. Thank you.